Hello interwebs, welcome to Let's Fix Computers. I've got a Microsoft Xbox Series S here with a busted HDMI port. So if we go in for the close-up there, you can see that that port is looking a bit chipped on the edge of the inside spade, if that's what you'd call it, which seems to be a very common failure point of these. That seems to be the bit that tends to get bashed up the most, or rather, like the outer edge does as well, but that doesn't affect the grip too much. But as soon as that inside spade gets chipped, the pins don't align properly, and that's it. The port is going to stop working. So we're going to replace the port on this. Now I did another one of these last night, so I'm actually hot off of the practice run for this. So I'm hoping this is going to be a very smooth example. So get your pitchforks ready in the comments, folks, and let's get into it. So I'm going to start by removing these two stickers on the back that cover up two of these screws. And then we slide off the bottom cover, and that gives us access to all of the main screws. I think this is probably my third Series S that I've done, and I think the Series S is looking to be by far and away my preferred Xbox for repairs at the moment, because it's incredibly easy to disassemble this thing. It's very straightforward in build. I kind of look at a lot of the older Xboxes as well as just other consoles and just wonder, you know, why is the construction so complicated on them? I can only imagine it's just, you know, wanting to discourage people from taking them to bits. You know, like, well, specifically maybe kids and stuff like that, but who knows? Anyway, so those two screws are off. That just slides off, and we get this interior brick. And all we've got to do now is pull out, firstly we pull out all the green screws, and then this silver brick will come out, and then we take off the silver screws, and the brick will open up to reveal a motherboard, a power supply, and a cooling fan. And that's fundamentally it. Really simple console, this. So let's start undoing those. These screws are pretty heavy duty. They're T10 screws. And they are very stiff because they go into plastic, so you want a big ass screwdriver for these guys. You can do it with a small one, but your life will be a lot easier if you get out the big screwdriver for these. I'm just going to loosen these off, and then I'll finish the job with a faster screwdriver. And now I'm just going to pull the sides out slightly while I lift it out, and that will just release the back shield. There we go. Ooh. Put that to one side. So before we take off the rest of those bottom screws now, we're just going to take off these three boards from around the outside. We've got two wireless boards and a power button board, and these are T8s. And thankfully, these have a nice distinct screw pattern on each one, so it's very easy to tell which one goes where when you're reassembling. And yes, you'll probably come across a lot of dust while working on these. I'm not going to worry about the dust too much while I'm disassembling. I tend to clean things up when I reassemble. Now for bottom screws. Cool. Now this top cover comes off like that, and it'll probably bring, yeah, the fan. The fan will start lifting up with it, but it's not attached. It just tends to stick, so that'll just come off. And I'm just going to disconnect the fan while it's out there. Put that to one side, into the pile of things that need to be dusted. And here's our little power supply, and that literally just lifts out. Whoop. It's got two big old spikes there that just go down into that connector. It does have this big pad of thermal putty, which goes onto the top of the storage expansion there. I'm not sure if that's to provide cooling for said storage expansion, but at any rate, that's a thing that exists, so just try not to disturb that. And then before we get the board out, we need to remove this little bit here. And that's just a little sort of insert that allows this USB port to poke through the chassis. So I'm just going to grab a pair of pliers and give that a pull. Like that. And we need to remove these 4 screws here. Now it does look like these screws are holding on the cooler, but they're not. They're just holding the entire motherboard to this bottom chassis. So we can take these off, and don't worry, the cooler doesn't fall off at this point. I'm actually not going to remove the CPU cooler from this, because you don't actually need to on the Series S. And so far as I can tell, there doesn't seem to be an issue with that. As I mentioned, I did one of these last night, and I thought I'll leave the cooler on and see what happens, and if that goes badly, then I'll take it off when I do the second one tomorrow. And yeah, I had no issues leaving the cooler on, which means I didn't need to disturb any of the cooling or thermal paste or anything like that. Given the fact that these things aren't that old, you know, like this one is Jan 21, I don't think these things are old enough for the thermal paste to actually have gone off in any meaningful way. So as far as I'm concerned, unless you're dealing with some other faults that lead you to believe that the thermal paste is toast, I wouldn't bother personally. However, I'm not a console expert, so take that with a pinch of salt. Right, now I'll just bend this bit outwards slightly just to lift past. And there's our motherboard removed. Huzzah! There's the SSD, so if you want to remove that to keep it safe or anything, now's a good time to do it. And again, we've got a couple more bits of thermal putty there for the main SSD, and there for this guy, which I'm assuming, that's SK Hynix, so I'm assuming this is the combined system and video memory. I'm guessing there's one there and another one on the other side of the board. So they put one on each side to keep it as close as possible to the core. Unless that's literally the only one, I'm not actually sure. But yeah, as you can see, really, really simple console this, and I really like the design of it, because I think modern consoles are far too complicated. I don't see why the Series X needs to be as complex as it is, when fundamentally all they need to do is just this, but with a bigger heatsink on it to account for the fact that it's got a bigger CPU. But I don't know about the design of it, so there we go. Right, I'm now going to just use a paintbrush just to lightly dust off the board. We're not going to sterilize it, but I'm just going to take off the surface dust just so that doesn't get burned away when we start doing rework. And I'm also going to remove these 2 bits of padding here. This stuff that you see here, this is sort of conductive foam. It's foam with a conductive layer around it. And this is designed to make sure that it's for grounding, basically. So it provides a slightly soft padding between the board and the chassis that is also conductive and keeps the ground connected to ground. So we can take off a couple of these just so we've got access, but we don't need to worry about replacing it. Right, now comes the part where we're going to start doing soldering work. So I'm going to adjust the camera, and I'm going to come in for a close-up with the Insta360, I think, and then we'll use the microscope when we need to a bit later on. So let me just readjust. So to start with on this, I'm going to just apply some fresh leaded solder to the pins and some flux, just to make sure that there's a little bit of lower melt point thermal mass on top of those. And we're going to heat from the back of the board this time, which is a piece of advice I've been told several times, but have been a little bit too scared to actually do. But I did it last night, and it worked a treat. I also did it on our PS5 this last week, and it worked a treat there as well. So I'm all down for the heat from the back method. The reason why I've always been terrified of heating from the back is the very first HDMI port replacement I tried to do was on a PS4, an original PS4. And I had a horrible time trying to get it off, and I ended up just ripping a whole bunch of traces and just butchered the thing. And I have just always lived in fear of the same thing happening again. The reality of that was, like, these days my hot air station is a little bit underpowered, but when I did that one, I had my original, like, amateur hot air station that was even weaker than my Quick 8570W is. And that was the real reason why I failed that. However, these ones, by the time you've actually melted these anchor points, those data pins, they're going to be flowing. So yeah. However, I still put that little bit of solder on because it helps out. It does make sure that that comes up to temperature and just holds a bit of heat to flow off nicely. So I'm also now going to add some fresh solder and flux to these anchor pins. And this solder isn't going to sort of wick down and mix very much, but it's going to provide just a blob of hot molten metal on top of those anchors to help conduct the heat down into the anchor. And when I was testing last night, I found that this does actually make a difference, because I had done it. I did it on two. I did it on two of them, and then the other two, I was kind of like, I'll do a bit of a half-assed job of that. And the two that I did a half-assed job with were significantly harder to get flowing. They were the last two to go, whereas these ones wanted to go much earlier. So it did actually work. So let's just add a blob of solder to the top of that. It's not going to adhere very well because we don't have any heat in this board yet. But don't worry about that. That's not what we're not trying to make a good join with this solder. We just need it to exist. Ow, I'm sticking to the board here. That'll do. Right, now we're going to come in and we're going to start heating, which is going to take a while. We're going to go full air, full heat, no nozzle, which again is what I was instructed to do. And in a surprise to no one, the person with more experience who instructed me to do it this manner, it worked. So lessons taken on board. Cool, full air, full power, let's go. And while I'm heating, I'm just going to use my soldering iron just to flow these again. And the hot air is just going to help where the soldering iron was struggling. I've got some solder onto that ground plane, but that's okay. We'll clean that up later. There we go. That's working nicely now. So we're just going to hang around and put in a lot of heat. And I'm just going to use my tweezers. And we're just going to use the tweezers to pull off the port. If you feel like your tweezers don't have enough power and you feel like you need to use pliers or something like that, you have not heated enough. It should be, when it happens, it should be effortless. I'm covering a lot of stuff up with the hot air at the moment, but that's because I'm trying to blow generally away from the rest of the board. But you can see what the idea is. I'm going to use my tweezers just to poke at solder now and then, because that helps me see where we're up to. These smaller bits of solder where I'm poking now, those have gone molten, so I can see that we're starting to get heat down. This guy's ready to go. That guy's ready. That one about is. Yeah, we might be looking good actually. Yeah, that's all molten. Let's give it a try. Oh, it's not a good time, phone. Not a good time. I'm ignoring you. No. Go away. So just because the solder on the surface has gone molten, it doesn't mean that the whole anchor is molten, which is why it's not moving yet. But it does just show that we've got surface heat down. Come on. Oh, it's starting to go now. I saw those move when I tried to wobble it. Front anchors are ready. There goes the back. We're coming off, but it's going wonky. There we go. It's out. There we go. There's our old HDMI port. Put that to one side. Right, and I'm going to keep working while I've got heat in the board now. As per my previous methods, I'm just going to add in a little bit of extra leaded solder, and then I'm going to come in with a desoldering gun to clear these holes. Because the desoldering gun hot air combo works really well for me. And I'll die on that hill personally. There we go. Right, I'm going to quickly stick the nozzle back on my hot air station for this bit. Alright, here we go. GG easy. Right, now I'm just going to give those pins a quick pass over with the soldering iron just to tidy them up a bit. There we go. Alright, it's time for a new HDMI port. So I'm going to bust out the spare. Ah, I've got a little bump there. I'm going to get rid of that. And now to put in the HDMI port, that's just going to press in. It's not even going to press in. I've actually got to hold it in place. It'll just fall off. We've got two plastic locator pegs to make sure that we're lined up. And I've got this old screen hinge that I'm going to use. And I'm just going to rest that underneath the port to hold the port in place. And if I get that right, that will actually hold the port completely flat. There we go. And now I just want to get one anchor soldered in just right, just to hold everything in place while we do the alignments. Now, this is where the other problems that I've had come in. Again, where I'm using a little bit of a weak soldering iron for this job, we are going to need some assistive hot air again. So I'm going to stick some solder on there. And that solder is going to sit on the top of the hole, and then I'll reflow it, and it will actually wick down the hole. So we've got a little solder bump on top of that. Now we come in with hot air again, and I'm going to tone the hot air down a little bit, just back to 350. And now we're going to flow that again, and that solder should go flat as it wicks down the hole. Just like that. There we go. I think I actually need more than that. However, this initial one is just so we can do an alignment check. I don't think we're quite flat there. Yeah, we're not quite flat. It's difficult to show that on camera, but the port is just ever so slightly wonky. Oh, also that anchor is just not holding in. There's just not enough solder there at all. So we'll just take another swing at that. I'll put some more solder on top and we'll just flow that again. What I want is some kind of small clamp that can take the heat. I've got little plastic clamps, but they won't take heat, so I can't use them for soldering to like hold a port down while I actually solder it. There, that's actually flat to the board now. Again, it's difficult to show it perfectly in alignment on camera while I'm holding the board up, but take my word for it, that's actually in position. Good. Right, so now we can actually do the rest. So I'll put in flux to these other holes, and I'm going to start filling these guys up with solder. And once again, I'll use the hot air for assistive heat, just to make sure that the solder actually flows down through the hole. Put some big solder blobs on top. And reflow. Alright, those are all on there. It looks a little bit messy, but that's okay. We'll clean up in a moment. Let's just make sure that we're actually on properly. And I'm actually going to do a pull test because, again, if it just comes off my hands, it's not on. Yeah. Always when I'm on camera. Last night I did this and everything went swimmingly. First try, no problems. Always when I'm on camera. Maybe I'm just trying to go a little bit too fast for the camera. I think we just need more solder on there. So I'm just going to put some big old solder blobs on top again. And then once again, we'll wick those down. There we go, that's better. That's on properly now. Good, now we just need to get those pins down there. So I'm going to swing in with the microscope for this, just so we can see what we're doing. And we'll stick flux down there. And here we go. Not worried about the initial bridges that we make. I just want to make sure that we get solder on all of those pins. Come on. I want those ones near the bottom. There we go. Now I'll just put in some more flux and we'll just pull out those bridges. There's a bit too much solder down there, so I might just need to come in with the wick and just pull a little bit of solder out. Just need a little touch. try that out. There we go. That's more like it. Good. And alcohol. And cotton bud. There we go, and there's our soldered HDMI connector. There we go. I've left a few silver marks on the ground plane there, but that's fine. That's just cosmetic. It's not sticking up at all, so it's not going to stop the board from sticking down. Right, so now we've just got to put this back in, and then we can turn it on and try it. So let's back out and just lob all of this back in the case. Alright, there is our new HDMI port fitted. Let's plug it in, turn it on, and see if it works. So I'm just going to grab a HDMI cable and a power cable. HDMI in. Nice smooth new jack. Power cable in. And power button on the front. We got power. We got fan spin. And we'll just give it a minute to start up, and we should get a picture out of it. Xbox. Huzzah! Who's playing today? Is it Halo Man or Call of Duty Man? My favourite man. Good. Alright, so that is one fixed Xbox. Thank you very much for tuning in, everyone. Again, I'm still getting practice on these. Just as you think you've got it nailed down, one of them will give you trouble, but I think it's a matter of rushing. It's really easy to rush when you're on camera because you're just trying to get it done, trying to make it look slick and smooth. And I think just subconsciously I go just a little bit too fast on camera. But at any rate, each one, it gets easier and easier. And I mentioned on my podcast recently on Saturday that we've got this new generation of Xboxes and PS5s out and about at the moment. And if you have any kind of experience doing rework, you should try your hand at doing HDMI port replacements on these. Like, I don't do diagnostic and repair for any other faults with consoles because honestly I wouldn't know where to start. However, a HDMI report that is broken off, you don't need to know how the board works in order to replace that. So it's worth just getting some practice in on a couple of test boards and just learning to do that. And you can make some reliable money just fixing broken Xbox HDMI ports and broken PS5 HDMI ports. They're not going anywhere in a hurry. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thank you as always to my patrons, my Twitch subscribers, and my channel members. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye for now.